believe, in week 2 of our Good News series. James kicked it off last week. So I'm going to think about good news, the good news we have, and how we share that with other people. So in church, we often throw out big words like evangelism and mission. If you're anything like me, those two words might make you want to run a mile. Lots of you might know by now that I'm currently studying practical theology with the Congfed. And last week, I was up in Nottingham for a weekend of lectures. I've just started my 4th and final year, which some of you will also be more acutely aware of what a miracle that is. So one of the modules we've just started is called Contextual Mission. Mission in the context of where you are. But I think what I learned or realised the most in those lectures was something I've long suspected. I am not cut out for what springs to mind when I hear the word mission. Going out there in organised groups to walk up to people and say, "Let me tell you about Jesus." That is not me. For one, contrary to me being up here today speaking to you, I don't like public speaking. I don't like being in front of a large group of people talking. I'm actually quite shy when I don't know people. So the idea of striking up a conversation with a random person on the street is terrifying to me. Let alone striking up an off-the-cuff, let me tell you about Jesus conversation. And please don't think that I'm saying that those kind of conversations are not good, or they don't work, or you should never do that, because I know that some people have really, really great conversations that they've just struck up with someone in that way. I'm just trying to hopefully reassure some of you who might be more like me, who don't feel comfortable doing that, that you are not alone. There are probably a lot of us that find that whole idea terrifying. Every weekend I spend in Nottingham, we see various church groups in the city centre doing some preaching, some singing throughout the afternoons. And this sparked a really interesting conversation amongst the group of students as to what we thought of that. And it sounds terrible, but there was quite a consensus that most of us, even as fellow Christians, wanted to give them a wide berth, not make eye contact, and just get past as quickly as we could, because we found it kind of uncomfortable. I remember a really long time ago, I was walking through a city centre and thought, oh no, there's a crazy street preacher on the corner yelling about fire and damnation, and I was trying to just shirk around and get far away from that. And then to my slight horror, I was like, oh no, I know that person. And then they saw me, and then they dragged me into this really what felt like the most horrendously uncomfortable conversation I've been in for a long time. And I just wanted to run away the whole time and be like, I don't know this person. And again, I'm not saying that kind of thing doesn't work. I've heard people say that it was something more along those lines that they really needed to hear and made them realise that they wanted to know more about Jesus. But for me, I find that kind of thing very awkward, and I just want to be as far away from it as possible. When I was at university, I was part of the Christian Union, and we did lots of different events and missions weeks, which were great, and also sometimes very awkward. But it always used to make me uncomfortable that we had this kind of idea of, we're going to do evangelism from 10 till 12. We're going to go out there, we're going to evangelize, we're going to talk about Jesus, and then we're all going to go home and forget about it until next week. And I was like, I'm not sure it's something you can just turn off and on like a tap. And I used to spend most of that time thinking, please don't let anyone ask me about my faith or ask me to talk about Jesus and why I believe. For several reasons, I think. One being that I would absolutely do anything to avoid an awkward situation. That is the British person in me talking. I just don't want any awkwardness. I just want to go about my life and not make anyone uncomfortable. And because of that, I used to worry that talking about God would make other people uncomfortable. And maybe there was an element of embarrassment, and I've pondered over this a lot, because I don't think I was embarrassed about what I believed, but maybe just about how other people would see those beliefs. And possibly the main reason was I just didn't know how to talk about it without it getting weird and awkward. Which I think is what Peter's trying to get at in verse 15. Always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you for the reason of the hope that you have. And it suddenly hit me this week that maybe he wasn't saying you needed to have a whole logical, well thought out rationale for your beliefs. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, it's probably good to have some of that in mind. But I think rather he's saying, you know what, help yourself out and just take a moment to think about why you believe what you believe. Think about the hope you have. Think about what it is you think Jesus has done for you, and just tuck that away in your mind so that when someone asks you, you aren't left stumped feeling like it's come out of left field, and so you're left sort of blabbering senselessly or awkwardly stood in silence. But instead, you can say something coherent because you've already thought about it in your own time. It's a bit like a job interview. You prepare for a job interview, not necessarily to have the right answers, but to at least have an answer. You tend to think through what questions or type of questions they might ask. You stash away some answers or some scenarios that you can tweak to any scenario that they throw at you. For instance, when I came down to Devon and interviewed at this church to be the children's worker, I probably should have foreseen the question, what do you know about congregationalism and congregational churches? And I probably should have done some research into what a congregational church is. What actually happened was James said to me, what do you know about congregational churches? And I basically said, I'd never heard of them. But I thought that it must be something to do with the congregation. It's all good, they still hired me, and here I am today. So learn from me and be prepared, because I think that is half the problem. For a lot of us, it's not that we don't want to share our faith. It's just when it comes up, we don't really feel like we can, or we don't feel like we know how to. And then we feel like we're on the spot, and then it just gets very panicky and stressful. Because fundamentally, if we think Jesus and what he's done for us is so great, and the hope we have in him is what sustains us through all life's ups and downs, then of course we want to share that with people, with the people we know and love, and our friends and our family, and those we come into contact with. So I think the problem is we just don't know how to talk about our faith, especially in a meaningful way. Now, you may or may not believe, I can't believe this, but it's been over 10 years since I started university. And I was talking with James this past week about how society and people have changed over the years. And it is something that even I can relate to when I look back at my time at uni. One of the reasons I never like talking about Jesus at university is because my experience was often of people being quite scathing or making fun of it. And a lot of the talks the Christian Union put on were in effect trying to engage with that outlook. Talks such as, is faith just a psychological crutch? You can't handle the world, so you need something that is going to act as a crutch, something for you to lean on and help you make it through. But I think in more recent years, there's been a bit of a shift in society's thinking, and I think the COVID-19 pandemic enhanced that further. I used to worry that people would think that I was weak for having a faith. But what I've started to find is that actually people admire it, and they can see all the benefits of it and the community that it gives me. People are much more aware now, I think, and in touch with their spirituality. A lot of people want there to be something more, for there to be a reason for all of this. I've talked to a lot of people, friends, family, people I work with, who think there must be something bigger out there. They just don't know what it is, or they aren't sure they can fully trust or believe in God. I think people are less atheistic and more agnostic, less definitively against there being a God, but rather unsure of who or what that God is, and even more so find it hard to reconcile there being a God when you look out at the world and all the bad stuff that goes on. For me, I want and I hope that Jesus shines through in my everyday life. That's how I go about my day, hoping that people can see the difference that Jesus makes in my life by the things that I do and how I am. As Peter says, finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called, so that you may inherit a blessing. For whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. And believe me, I have not got all of those things at all down to a T, even slightly. But I do try to be more like who Peter says we should be. Sometimes Jesus shining through my everyday life can be a bit of a cop-out too, though, and an excuse for us and me to never mention Jesus ever, because it's fine, they'll just see it in the way that I am. But as our lovely new church vision incorporates, the sharing one over there behind Sarah, it's sharing the difference Jesus makes in our lives through our everyday words and actions. We need to incorporate both those things to share Jesus. But I think the key thing is be compassionate and humble. Peter says we should always be prepared to give an answer for the hope we have. But he follows on to say, but do that with gentleness and respect. Let's not go in there blazing with bashing people over the head with a Bible and shoving our beliefs and faith down their throats and dragging them into church. Because, let's be honest, if someone tried to do that to me, I would not be happy. And I would not at all be open to anything further after that. And I think when we're like that, people are actually much more open to talking about your experience of God. In fact, I've found between my friends recently that they're genuinely interested in my faith and what I believe, and not just in the we're British and we have to be polite and ask you what you're doing and why you think that out of common courtesy. But what they've taught me is I don't have to hide who I am or what I believe. They respect me and my beliefs, and I respect them and their beliefs, whatever they may be. I'm not interested in trying to prove God to anyone. I'm not interested in forcing my faith on people, not least because I wouldn't want something or someone to force their beliefs on me. I just enjoy the conversations, the opportunity to talk about my faith and what it means to me, and all the interesting things I learn from church on a Sunday, to also my theology course, which brings up lots of interesting discussion. I just want to share it because it's part of my life, a very important part of my life. And my friends are also a very important part of my life. So I want them to be involved in all aspects of my life. And the other thing is, talking about faith and Jesus doesn't have to be weird. This might be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of my pet peeves with Christians is how weird we manage to make everything. You know, you take movies, for example. You know, most of us watch movies all the time. I love movies, and I've also watched several Christian movies. And don't get me wrong, I do really like some of them. But also, I can't deny that a lot of them are very cheesy and a little bit weird. And I just find that as soon as you slap a Christian label on it, it gets weirder and just gives us all a bad rep. You know, why can't you just have a movie that maybe has Christian themes, but it's just like any other movie, and actually probably more people would want to watch it because it's not weird. And that's what I try to not be when I'm out and about in the world. Everyone at my work knows I'm a Christian. When I first started working there, it was quite handy because I was also working part-time here at church. So people used to ask me what I was doing on the days that I wasn't at work. And I told them I was a children's worker at my church. And then when I started preaching more and I got asked what I was doing with my weekends, I'd say, I'm preaching at church. And that led to conversations about, what is preaching? What are you going to talk about? And to be honest, I was genuinely surprised at the interest my friends at work showed in what I was doing and what sort of things I would be saying about God. I think I had more conversations about God and really interesting discussions about different bits of theology when I first started working there than I had when I worked in a Christian setting. Because ironically, when you work in a Christian setting, you realise that you actually don't do a lot of talking about God with the people you work with, because you all just are kind of like, well, we all know this and that's that. And I think it actually made me think harder about what it is I believe, because actually people were asking me and I needed to give them a reason. I actually said to a couple of my friends this week, I'm speaking at church about how to share our faith. So what is it about how I talk to you about my faith that doesn't make you want to punch me in the face? And other than saying they would never punch me in the face, obviously, the main thing they said is, you don't harp on about it all the time. You do talk about it, but it's not in our face all the time, and it just comes up naturally because it's a part of who you are. And they said it's so refreshing, you don't try and shove your faith down our throats, but you're also really open to talking about it when we do want to talk about it. And you don't judge us for what we think or what we say, and you don't get offended when we disagree with you or say something about God that you don't agree with. But you let us ask our questions and talk to us about it without trying to change our minds. You respect what we think, and that's it, isn't it? We want to go about sharing our faith, but in gentleness and respect. Because if we don't respect other people and what they believe, why would they respect our beliefs? It's not about getting into an argument, or at least not for me. It's not, mostly because I'm terrible at arguing. But it's just about saying, this is a part of who I am, and it's important to me. And you're my friends, so I want to share that part of my life with you, because I think it's great. And I also want to change what can be quite a common perception, that Christians are judgy and in your face trying to convert you all the time, because I don't think that's helpful to people. And most of us aren't like that. So I guess my point is, don't hide your faith. It's an integral part of who you are. Just be yourself. Don't stress so much about all of this that you try and become someone you're not. I cannot go up to someone in the street and start a conversation about faith in God. I just can't do it. But I will happily sit and chat with my friends and start and tell them what I did at church, or what interesting thing I learned, or the interesting questions I have about God. Because that's something else I've learned. I always used to think, I can't show any of my doubts to people because that'll put them off. If I'm not sure 100%, well, they're not going to be sure. But actually, I had a conversation with a friend at work, and he was like, it's so nice that you don't think that you know all the answers, and actually you still have questions too, even though you've been going to church since you were a kid and you've believed in Jesus most of your life. It's so helpful and nice to know that you don't think you have all the answers, because I really don't. And quite possibly, the older I get, the more questions I have. But I think it makes us more real and relatable to people to know that we're all just on this journey, figuring our way out with God, and we all have struggles with our faith, at some point or another. None of us are perfect, and every journey has bends and bumps in the road. But what I always say to them is, I wouldn't want to be doing this bumpy journey of life without God on my side, walking with me and picking me up every time I fall. In today's world, I think everyone just wants to be around real people. So be real about your faith and how it changes your life. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you walk with us and you are alongside us along this bumpy road. And thank you that you're with us in each conversation we have. Help us to not feel scared or embarrassed to talk about the ways that you have impacted our lives and the things that we believe. But help us to naturally take you with us and share you in our everyday life and our everyday words and our actions with all the people that we come into contact with. Amen.